The death toll from the bombings outside of the Kabul airport in Afghanistan carried out by the group ISIS-K during the US evacuation process from that country has risen to 170 people with at least 200 wounded. That does not include the 13 US service members who were killed and 15 US service members who were also wounded. But a few more updates on that. On Friday, the US military revised its account of what happened at the airport a day earlier, with Major General William Taylor of the Joint Staff saying, "We do not believe that there was a second explosion or near the Bagram Hotel, that it was one suicide bomber." But many witnesses reported hearing 2 blasts. The general also said that the evacuation process is continuing. So some 111,000 people, American citizens, Afghan allies, and foreign nationals have been evacuated from the country since Kabul fell to the Taliban this month. And of course, we had words from President Biden, who is also undeterred in continuing to withdraw US troops from Afghanistan, but then had these very nostalgic words to say for the purveyors of that attack. Take a look.
We will not forgive. We will not forget. We will hunt you down and make you pay. I've also ordered my commanders to develop operational plans to strike ISIS-K assets, leadership, and facilities. We will respond with force and precision at our time, at the place we choose, in a moment of our choosing.
So there you have it. President Joe Biden saying we will hunt you down, and essentially making plans to effectively go back into Afghanistan, although maybe not as much as some would like. But I just wanted to get Cenk and Jordan, your reactions to those words and to what's been happening.
All right, we got serious commentary, of course. It's a very serious issue, but I'm gonna lighten it up for 1 second by saying every time they say ISIS-K, I think Special K. So I don't know, they gotta do something about their name. It doesn't sound very menacing. This is the new ISIS flakes. Okay, anyways, so the problem here, of course, is that cable news is filled wall to wall with neoconservatives. So the old guard and everybody in Washington only watches cable news. The rest of us are so freaking frustrated with cable news. And the main thing we do is criticize it. But in Washington, they're still demigods. And so when they see all the government officials and all the generals and all the defense contractors all over cable news shaking their finger at Joe Biden, "This is the worst day of your presidency. We need more blood and war." That's why he comes out and says things like this. Is he really gonna go back in? I hope not. Will they do special forces, drone strikes? Of course they will. Will they hit the right people? Sometimes. Will they hit the wrong people? Definitely, right? And so that disaster will continue, usually through drone strikes.
I mean, and on that point, if you even dare mention that we kill innocent civilians with drone strikes, they'll lock you up. Look, like Daniel Hale needs freed just for speaking truth to that issue. So I also want to thank Fran for even centering people who were killed that are Afghans. Like that's something you aren't seeing represented in media across the country. We had 13 Americans die and then a number of Afghans. Even like purportedly more liberal outlets like BuzzFeed were just treating them as an afterthought. So it's important to center Afghan voices in this process. I mean, no other network that I could think of has done more to that effort than TYT. Arash Azizadeh of Afghans for a Better Tomorrow has been on 3 different shows on the network in the past week and a half, because TYT and I think the progressive independent media at large understands we should not be listening to the people who got us into this mess in the first place. We need to listen to people who are adversely impacted by our foreign policy and then move forward with a robust reconciliation and aid package to Afghans.
Absolutely, but as Cenk mentioned, of course, neocons are back at it. We thought they were gone, but the zombie movie just continues. It's just like hand through soil. Here they come, and lawmakers from the far right and also from former Democratic administrations are speaking out and saying that apparently we will not forget or forgive, and we're going to hunt you down. The words of Joe Biden are not strong enough. So here is what Mark Green had to say, Representative Green, I believe, on CNN.
Straw man for the Taliban, but what do you think the U.S. response to this immediately should be?
I think the President of the United States should come out and say all bets are off. The Taliban have absolutely defied this agreement by not securing, they didn't keep their promise to secure the access routes to the airfield. We are going to expand this operation. I'd put more military in there. I'd get every single American out, and I'd start killing bad guys.
Yeah, we were killing. I mean, is he going to continue and say how many good guys we killed? How many wedding parties were drone striked? No, that's obviously not what he means. Just bad guys, good guys. Awesome. Do they know there are two sets of supposed bad guys? We've got the Taliban and ISIS-K. But of course, I just want to read a couple more things. This is down the line from Republican lawmakers. GOP Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska released a statement urging Biden to reverse course, fight for our people, insisting, quote, weakness will accelerate bloodshed, while pushing the administration to rip up the August 31st deadline, expand the perimeter beyond Kabul. Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee also mentioned a forceful response from the president and saying that he must follow through on his word and make these terrorists pay. Does anyone care what Dan Crenshaw has to say? Fine, why not? He says, this war is clearly not ended. You can't unilaterally end a war. It takes two to tango. Awesome, and these people will never stop fighting us. He said on Fox News Thursday morning, we should retake more airfields through the country. It will take troops on the ground and a complete reassessment of our strategy. The military can do it. We need the political will to do it. That was also echoed by Senator Lindsey Graham. Let's bring up his tweet saying, I urge the Biden administration to reestablish our presence in Bagram as an alternative to the Kabul airport so that we do not leave our fellow citizens and thousands of Afghan allies behind. It is not a capacity problem, but a problem of will. I honestly, after 20 years, I don't know which is which at this point, Mr. Graham. But did we expect this rush of neoconservatives to come in, even though this is a plan that President Trump had put into play before he left?
Well, so here's the deal. Do neoconservatives exist in the world? Of course they do, right? And we know Lindsey Graham and Crenshaw are all bloodthirsty, and they are always going to push for more and more endless wars. That's not the question. The question is, do you platform them, and then do you platform them to the exclusion of everyone else? And then on top of that, you know that 3/4 of the country is for withdrawal, 73% in a poll, right? So do you put 3/4 of your experts saying we should get out of the war, but I have got issues with the exit? Or do you do what cable news has done and make 99% of your experts pro-war, neoconservative war hawks? So the cable news has done something ironic here. It has united the left wing and the right wing in a nearly miraculous fashion. And here comes the extra miracle layered on top. Even some neoliberals who are Biden fans going, well, this is absurd. This is just wall-to-wall propaganda for more war. Thank you for finally waking up and realizing that's all that cable news does. I mean, look at that horse crap they peddled. By the way, every time these guys come on, these war hawks, they're never challenged, never. I'm gonna get back into that in a second, but I just wanted to draw attention to two of the quotes that you heard. First guy said, we gotta go in and kill more bad guys. And what a purposely dumb thing to say. Like, okay, yeah, but who? Who are the bad guys? How do we kill them? And if it was that easy, why didn't we do it over the last 20 years? Well, why? Like Fran was referring to, were we accidentally killing good guys? Yes, so is that your confession, right? Or were you not sure, good guys or bad guys? Who do we kill? Just, you simpletons. And then there's no reporters on television. And then they sit there and go, oh, okay, good analysis by our expert. We should kill more bad guys. Instead of, if you, like anyone who's 10% reporter would then turn around to the guy and say, excuse me, but what do you mean by killing more bad guys? What a dumb thing to say. Anyway, and then Crenshaw, he says, these people will never stop fighting us. I love that irony. He says we should never stop fighting them. And then he says, they will never stop fighting us. No, you schmuck, you're making the argument that we should never stop fighting them. And it's like the oldest, and by the way, bigoted, Islamophobic, you name it, talking point there is all these people understand as violence. It's the same reason Israel's been doing occupation for decade after decade. Palestinians, Muslims, all they understand is violence. That's why we have to commit violence upon them endlessly. I'm so sick of it. By the way, I have a different idea. I'll just run it by you guys real quick. How about we get out of the way and let the Taliban and ISIS-K fight one another? Oh, then that way the bad guys kill each other instead of us standing in the middle and taking all the bullets. But don't say it on TV. Don't say it on TV. The logic, facts, and reason not allowed on cable news.
Yeah.
I also want to point out that Leon Panetta it's never mentioned when he's introduced or providing analysis that he's a defense contractor. The Intercept has done a great job following the former defense intelligence officials who have been making the rounds on cable news to call for a further engagement in Afghanistan or in the Middle East at large, without disclosing their ties to the military-industrial complex. Beacon Global Strategies is where Leon Panetta is a senior advisor. That's a defense contractor. But that rhetoric you're seeing, that language you're seeing, kill the bad guys. And also there was a tweet that went around yesterday from conservative commentator Todd Starnes that said, for every one American killed, we need to destroy an entire Afghan village. That kind of mindset is genocidal and rooted in a jingoism that infects our foreign policy, where we see people around the world as inferior and subhuman, where their lives, if they die even to an existential amount more than Americans, is just totally dismissed. They're never given the same sort of dignity or respect that Americans are. And it also implies, like, we got to kill the bad guys, that our cause is always noble and just. And now we're talking about an invasion. Think about that. Think about how little that makes sense. So to push back on that rhetoric is important, but you're never going to see that on CNN, and in many cases, not even on MSNBC.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say, I think a lot of us have imagined that the neoconservative sort of war hawk mindset was kind of like, on the back burner a little bit, considering that Trump was one of the only Republican candidates in 2016 to actually like speak against the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, right? And that seemed to be gaining traction. And you gotta realize that like America first and that jingoism is not about not intervening. It's about when you intervene, just bludgeoning. It's about more bombs, more strikes. We know that Trump upped the number of drone strikes in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And so it is not this. What they don't have is the idea that we should nation build, right? Like that's sort of a neoliberal line. That's sort of a benevolent, global cop line of the Clintons. Like, let's go spread democracy. Republicans don't have any interest in democracy. I think both are interventionist and both are wrong. But it is interesting to remember that like at their heart, they're like, oh no, war good, more war, just more dead people. But you mentioned Leon Panetta, Jordan, and I wanna go to him. Obviously, he's not disclosing his weapons manufacturers' ties here and his lobbyist ties to the weapons industry, but he has been making the rounds. Here he is on Meet the Press. This is former CIA Director Leon Panetta.
We can't just say to hell with Afghanistan at this point, because the fact is, the president yesterday said we have to go after ISIS. We have to go after those who are involved in this attack. That's going to require counterterrorism operations to go after them. The same thing's going to be true with Al-Qaeda. I think the likelihood is that Al-Qaeda will reestablish itself with the Taliban. And we're going to have to go after Al-Qaeda. So the work in Afghanistan is not finished. We are going to have to find ways to go after terrorists wherever they are. You
go, Leon. You go. Can we talk? Can we just say this? You and Dan. And like Martha Blackburn, you guys can all go. If you want to go in Afghanistan, you volunteer, you be in the front lines. But thoughts on this? I mean, this is again, it's like we can never get out of the wars, the so-called forever wars. Leon Panetta earlier is saying, that's the thing with the war on terror. We can never end it. Essentially, we can never end it. Really misunderstanding how and why the war on terror even began, right? That is because of interventionist strategies around the world that has destabilized countries, that has led to more extremism. It's because of the murdering of the moderates, of not negotiating with the Taliban when we had a chance to, that we have been in this situation that led to things like the creation of ISIS in the first place, and now spin-off letters of ISIS.
Leon Panetta is an excellent example of what cable news does wrong, and he was all over television. So The guy was former CIA director, former defense secretary, by the way, under Obama. And Obama continued this disastrous war for 8 years. And apparently we didn't do any government building. We didn't build a military of Afghanistan at all. It was under Obama as well as under Bush and under Trump. Everything we did in Afghanistan was a complete and utter failure that fell apart in 11 days. So the correct question to Leon Panetta is, can you account for your failures? And I'm not saying this hyperbolically or rhetorically or like a gotcha. No, it's a real question. For all that time when you were the CIA director, the intelligence you gave to the American, to the president and to the American people was that we were doing great in Afghanistan. We just need to stay a little longer, just stay a little longer. And we were doing terrific and everything was gonna be fine. And then when you were defense secretary, you wanted to stay longer and longer and longer and longer. And what did we get for it? Nothing. Nothing but wasted lives, wasted money, dead civilians. And so you're bringing him on and you're not mentioning that failure? That's unbelievable. If there were any journalists on television, they would say, but Secretary Panetta, we do have to ask, you were an enormous part of what happened in the occupation in Afghanistan. And given that the government fell apart instantly, isn't it your fault that you couldn't help Afghanistan put together a decent government and military after 20 long years? How do you account for your miserable failure? Instead, they're like, oh, tell us how we need more wars and more disastrous failures and incompetence like you did. It's just sickening. The only segment that apparently that cable news did was Brian Stelter did a segment with Matthew Dowd, who's a former, I don't know if he's still a Republican or a former Republican, and Amanda Marcotte, and they both questioned, hey, maybe we should have somebody on cable news that is against the war, like 3/4 of the country. But no one listened, and they continue to bring on hawk after hawk, and the anti-war position is never going to be represented in cable news because they're enormously biased.
I just wanted to add, I mean, so last night we had Spencer Ackerman on Deep Dive, who just published Reign of Terror, and I would highly recommend that. It's a great look at the post 9/11 era and how it destabilized our society and created the conditions that Trump exploited to rise to power. But within that, after finishing it, you see several characters pop up time and time and time again to justify the worst attributes and the worst endeavors of the American imperial project. And I think it underscores how nobody is ever going to face accountability for any of this. We have hundreds of thousands of people dead as a result of an invasion and another war based on lies. And the former was, sold to us as the good war, right? Iraq got a little bit more murky, but this was, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, and now all of those same people who sold us this war on lies, who killed hundreds of thousands of people, are still on TV saying we need to stay in there. And you even have Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, bragging about our ability to strike anywhere around the world, diplomatic tours. So we're not going to end our war in Afghanistan. It's just going to transition to a more unseen, aerial, unmanned effort, because it's much easier to sell that way when you don't have people coming home in body bags.
Now, I gotta say one last thing. They live in such a bubble and in such enormous groupthink that they genuinely, nobody even thinks, maybe we should ask Panetta. Or Ryan Crocker was on, and he was an ambassador to Afghanistan. He was also ambassador to Iraq. He was under Bush, and Obama was like, oh, I love Bush's war. Let's continue it in terms of Afghanistan. Oh, I'll take Crocker, the hawk there, and put him in Afghanistan, and we'll win in Afghanistan. And it never occurs to any of the journalists on television to ask, hey, didn't Crocker screw this up? Didn't Panetta screw this up? We're all criticizing the exit. Almost all of our guests are saying we should stay longer. But wait a minute, we stayed for 20 years and it just, none of the producers, none of the hosts, none of them thought, hey, maybe I should ask a question of one of these guys. Didn't you also do something wrong in those 20 years? And to me, the fact that they don't even realize that they're in that bubble and that they have that unbelievable bias that the rest of us cannot stand, the fact that they can't see it is almost more damning.
No, and also talk to a veteran. Look, stop, your intelligence was wrong. It's been wrong for years and years and years. That's why Kabul fell in 11 days. So Talk to a vet who was on the ground. Talk to a combat vet. They'll tell you the reality, but it's so laundered through generals up the chain and through contractors and everyone looking to get a little piece and a little bite that you never actually are told the reality. And yeah, the status quo is let's just continue to stay in Afghanistan and slowly lose this war.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.